would like to address a couple of the claims that my opponents have been making. And first I want to address one of the claims that they've been making. They've been talking about waterboarding a lot as a technique that is maybe being used quite frequently, and it was quite frequently used on 2 individuals. But this is not a technique that's first resort, and none of us on the affirmative side have been advocating that we get rid of FBI techniques like rapport building, trying to get information in other ways. But when it fails, we should be allowed to use these techniques to get valuable information. These techniques, the CIA has said, is the only way that we've obtained this kind of information. Now, the opponents have argued that, well, in one out of 10 times, or 9 out of 10 times, traditional methods works. That's great. But that 1 out of 10 time, or that 10% of the time that it doesn't work, we don't use enhanced interrogation techniques to get that information. We're talking another 3,000 lives maybe lost. Before the CIA said before the CIA used enhanced techniques on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he resisted giving any answers to questions about future attacks, simply noting, "Soon you will find out." And once the techniques were applied, interrogations have led to specific actionable intelligence as well as general increase in the amount of intelligence regarding Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. So that 10% that the general techniques, the traditional rapport building techniques did not garner, these enhanced interrogation techniques saved lives. And that's the most important thing we're talking about here. And my opponents also talked about it wouldn't be plausible. The examples of success are again, once again, they cite statistically that traditional techniques work better in some circumstances. That's great. Again, we should use traditional techniques first, but we need to have these enhanced interrogation techniques on the table at all times. My opponents also argue that it's simply against the law, and therefore, whether they work or not, we should be allowed to use them. Well, the U.S. Department of Memo, written by Jim Bybee in March of 2003, said that we examined the applicability of customary international law. We concluded that as an expression of state practice, customary international law cannot impose a standard that differs from the U.S. obligations under the Convention of Torture. A recent multilateral treaty on the same subject. In any event, our previous opinions make clear that customary international law is not federal law, and that the President is free to override it at his discretion. These are not normal combatants. And my opponents have pretty much given us that they're not normal combatants, and basically said, well, if it's against the law or it's against American values or tradition, then we shouldn't use them. But they're not addressing the fact that these conventions that we've signed, the laws that we put in place, were designed for conventional militaries. These terrorists don't fight for a state. They don't represent a state. They represent an ideology or a religion or things of that nature. They're not traditional combatants. We cannot treat them like traditional combatants that when we signed the Geneva Convention and the Convention Against Torture, we can't treat them like that. So in closing, we have to keep these enhanced interrogation techniques on the table. They work. The CIA has said the detainees supplied data that permitted us to round up terrorists as they were being trained, rather just before they came ashore. Not headline stuff, but the bread and butter of successful counterterrorism. We're getting information about terrorists before they even become terrorists. We're getting information with these techniques. We're not getting this information simply and only with traditional methods.